My name is Harper Garcia. I am 34 years old. 4 years ago, I uncovered my mother's devastating secret that the family business I helped build for 12 years was drowning in $1,800,000 of hidden debt from her reckless decisions, and I chose silence to protect my son. Now, in this packed lawyer's office, she is forcing me to sign papers handing everything to my sister while declaring I never truly belonged in the family and that my husband would be better off without me dragging him down. The air feels thick with betrayal, but my mind is razor sharp. I have prepared for this exact moment, and I refuse to break no matter what she throws at me today. If you have ever been blindsided by someone who was supposed to love you unconditionally, drop a like and comment where you are watching from so we can support each other. The conference room at the family attorney's office in Sacramento felt like the center of a storm that had been building for years. My mother sat at the head of the long oak table, her posture perfect, her eyes locked on me with that familiar mix of pity and contempt. My husband sat beside me, his hands clasped so tight his knuckles were white. My sister was on my mother's right, scrolling her phone with a little smirk she did not bother hiding. The lawyer was flipping through the stack of documents, and my neighbor had shown up for support, but I was already questioning whose side she was really playing. My mother leaned forward, first her voice dripping with that cutting sarcasm she had perfected over the years. "Harper, let us not pretend anymore. You have always been the weak link in this family. You never had the vision or the strength to carry the business I started. Sign the transfer papers today. The house, the property management company, all of it goes to me and your sister. You can keep Mateo. That is the most generous offer you are going to get." The words landed like a slap I had been waiting for. I kept my expression soft and defeated the way I had practiced in the mirror for weeks. My father let out a forced, awkward laugh to try and cut the tension, then said quickly, "This is getting heavy. We can step outside and talk about it privately later." He gave me a quick glance that said he knew this was wrong, but he was not about to challenge her in front of everyone. I nodded slowly, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just want what is best for Mateo and for everyone to move on without more fighting." Inside my chest, my heart was hammering, but my plan was still solid. 4 years of quiet preparation had led me to this exact table. The liability disclosure addendum was tucked in the middle of the stack, ready to make sure that if my mother took the assets, she also took every single debt that came with them. I met my husband when I was 18 at a small community event right here in Sacramento. He was 23 and full of ideas about growing the property management company my mother had launched a few years earlier. I was working as a customer success representative at a local tech firm, good with details and numbers, and I started helping with the books on evenings and weekends because it felt like a way to contribute to the family. We got married when I was 21. Mateo came along when I was 22. I kept my job part-time at first while raising him, but the business needed more hands, and I gradually poured 9 years into it, handling client contracts, coordinating with contractors, managing the books. Everything my mother preferred not to deal with herself while she took the public credit at every industry gathering. For 9 years, I was the unpaid backbone. My official title was wife and mother. My real job was keeping the whole operation running while my mother collected the praise and my husband chased the next deal. She never once said thank you. Instead, she would toss out little jabs like Harper. "It is lucky we let you be part of this at all," with that smile that never reached her eyes. My husband started staying out later, making decisions without me, and somewhere along the way the marriage began to fray. My mother noticed, and instead of helping, she started whispering to him that I was the problem, that I lacked ambition, that I was dragging the family down. Then, 4 years ago, everything changed. I was reconciling the accounts late one night after Mateo had gone to bed. A transfer to an account I did not recognize caught my eye. Then another. I stayed up until 3 in the morning following the trail, and the picture that emerged made my blood run cold. My mother had been taking out loans against the house and the business without telling any of us. 3 mortgages on the house totaling $900,000 against a market value of only $750,000. Lines of credit maxed at $200,000. Back taxes and vendor debts adding up to another $300,000. The company we had all poured years into was underwater by $300,000 overall, and the cars were leased with balloon payments due soon. The money had gone to her secret lifestyle trips. She never mentioned gambling losses. Lifestyle expenses she kept hidden. I sat there surrounded by printouts and did the math. We looked stable from the outside, but we were living on borrowed time and borrowed money. My first instinct was to confront her, but I knew my mother too well. If I called her out, she would turn it around, make me the villain, and probably find a way to cut me out of my own separate savings. I had always kept a little something of my own, the retirement account from my tech job days, and the inheritance from my grandmother that totaled $460,000. It was legally separate, and I had never mixed it with the family finances. So I did not confront her. Instead, I protected what I could. I reached out to my uncle, a retired accountant, and together we set up an irrevocable trust for Mateo. My retirement funds and the inheritance went into it completely untouchable by anyone including my mother or my husband. I printed every document, every loan statement, every suspicious transaction, and stored copies in a safe deposit box and on an encrypted drive. Then I waited. I knew my mother would eventually push too far. People like her always do. I just had to be ready when it happened. The last 12 months had been a slow burn of escalating pressure. My mother started bringing my sister around the house more often. My sister would walk into our kitchen like she already owned it, wear my apron, use my blender, and make comments about how the place needed a fresh touch now that she was helping run the business. My husband started agreeing with her, putting his arm around her shoulder right in front of me, like I was already invisible. My mother would smile and say things like, "Your sister just has that natural talent you never quite developed, Harper." The humiliation built day by day. My mother canceled my access to the joint business accounts, first saying we needed to separate responsibilities. Then she suggested I should probably find somewhere else to stay while we sorted things out. My own home. She even had my sister help her go through my closet and decide what I deserved to keep. Old clothes, fine. Family photos, some of them. Anything of real value was suddenly a family asset. Through all of it, I had one person I thought I could lean on, my neighbor. We had been close for years, sharing coffee and venting about life. She was the first one I called after the first big fight with my mother. She brought over wine and listened. But little things started to feel off. My mother would know my plans before I told her. When I mentioned to my neighbor I was thinking about fighting for the house, my husband came home the next day repeating my words almost verbatim. When I told my neighbor I was looking at apartments in a specific neighborhood, my mother made a comment about that exact area being too expensive for someone like me. It clicked. My neighbor had been carrying information straight to my mother for months, probably in exchange for favors, or just the thrill of being in the inner circle. The worst part was watching Mateo pull away. My 13-year-old son saw the girlfriend-like role my sister was playing, saw my mother packing my things, saw the way his father and my mother looked at me like I was already gone. My mother was working on him daily, dropping comments like, "Your mom is making this so difficult for everyone, and I am just trying to keep the family stable, but she will not cooperate." Mateo started getting distant, confused, not sure who to believe. That was the knife that cut deepest. I hired a lawyer sharp and no nonsense. She reviewed the situation and laid out the strategy. When I told her I did not want to fight in the usual way, she looked at me like I had lost my mind, until I placed the 4 binders of evidence on her desk. Her expression changed from pity to respect. The trap was already built. All I had to do was let my mother think she was winning. The next months were an acting performance. I showed up to every meeting with red eyes and trembling hands. I asked for almost nothing, just $35,000 cash and my personal belongings. My mother agreed immediately, probably thinking she had finally broken me. She bragged to her friends that I had given up without a fight. My sister redecorated the living room and painted the kitchen a cold gray that erased every choice I had ever made. My husband posted photos online about new beginnings. My neighbor kept calling to fish for information, and I fed her exactly what my mother needed to hear. Behind the scenes, my lawyer prepared the addendum. When my mother signed for all the assets, she would also be assuming every single liability. The mortgages, the business debts, the lease obligations, all of it would become her sole responsibility. It was all legal, airtight, and devastating if she actually read it. 2 weeks before this meeting, my mother called me late one night. "Harper, I am doing this for the family. You should be grateful." I stared at the phone and said nothing. Inside, I knew the end was close. Back in the conference room, my mother pushed the papers toward me. "Sign, Harper. Stop wasting everyone's time." My father tried another awkward laugh, but it died in his throat. My neighbor shifted uncomfortably in her chair. My lawyer watched me carefully. I picked up the pen, my hand steady, but just as I lowered it to the first page, my mother got a text. She read it, her face changing for a split second, and I caught the flicker of something I had not expected. A new piece of information that made me wonder if she had been one step ahead after all. My mother glanced down at her phone, and the shift in her expression was so subtle, most people would have missed it. But I had spent 4 years studying every micro-expression she made, waiting for the moment she would slip. She set the phone face down with deliberate calm, then turned those sharp eyes back on me, her voice dropping into that familiar sarcastic drawl that always cut straight to the bone. "Harper, darling, it seems your little side meetings with the lawyer have not been as private as you thought. Your neighbor mentioned you have been hoarding documents like some paranoid squirrel. Really, you think you can outsmart the woman who built this family from nothing?" The words hit hard, but I kept my face blank, the defeated mask I had worn for months. My mother leaned back, crossing her arms, clearly enjoying the power she held in that room. "You have never been the smart one, have you? Always the follower, the helper, who never quite measured up. Sign the papers. The house, the company, the cars. Everything transfers to me and your sister today. $35,000 is more than you deserve after dragging us down all these years." My sister looked up from her phone, her smirk widening as she jumped in right on cue. "My mother is right. You never had the drive for this business anyway. I have been the one stepping up while you played housewife." My husband shifted in his seat beside me, his hand brushing mine for a second before he pulled away. He did not say anything, but the way he avoided my eyes told me everything. My father sat across from us, his jaw tightening in quiet anger. For once, he did not laugh it off or change the subject. Instead, he pushed his chair back slightly, his voice low but edged with frustration. "This is not the place for this kind of talk. Harper is still the mother of your grandson. Can we at least step outside for a moment?" My mother shot him a look that silenced him instantly. "Stay seated. This is family business and I am handling it." He stayed put, but I could see the tension in his shoulders the way he glanced at me with something close to regret before looking away again. It was the closest he had ever come to pushing back, and even that small act felt like a tiny crack in the wall they had built around me. My neighbor fidgeted in her chair but did not deny it. "I was just worried about you, Harper," she said softly, but her eyes darted to my mother for approval. The betrayal stung fresh, even though I had suspected it for weeks. My mother had been using her as another set of ears, feeding her little favors in return. I picked up the pen again, my hand steady on the outside while my mind raced. This was the moment. The addendum was buried in the stack, the liability disclosure that would make my mother personally responsible for every loan, every overdue tax, every vendor debt if she took the assets. 4 years of quiet work with my uncle copying statements, hiding the encrypted drive at his house in the suburbs. I had waited for her to demand everything exactly like this. But the text she had just read made me pause. "What else did she know?" My mother tapped the table impatiently. "Stop stalling, Harper. You have been nothing but a burden since Mateo was born. Your husband deserves better than a wife who cannot even keep the book straight. Sign." The room felt smaller with every word. I thought back to the night 4 years ago when I first found the trail of debt. I had been alone in the home office after Mateo went to bed, reconciling the accounts like I did every month. One transfer after another to accounts I had never seen. Loans against the house totaling $900,000 on a property worth only $750,000. The business lines of credit maxed at $200,000. Back taxes and vendor bills pushing the total underwater by $300,000. The money had vanished into her private trips or gambling habits she hid from everyone, expenses she never brought home. I had sat there surrounded by papers until dawn, realizing the entire life we had built was a house of cards. Confronting her would have ended with me blamed and cut off. So, I chose silence and preparation instead. I had moved my separate retirement savings and the inheritance from my grandmother into the trust for Mateo that very week, working with my uncle to make it ironclad. He had warned me it would take patience, but I had it. I documented everything, stored copies in 3 different places, and played the perfect supportive daughter while watching her dig the hole deeper. My husband started pulling away, spending more evenings with my mother and my sister planning expansions I was no longer consulted on. My mother would casually remark in front of guests that I was lucky they let me stay involved at all, that my customer success job at the tech firm had never prepared me for real responsibility. The humiliation had built like a slow poison. One evening 2 months ago, my mother had shown up unannounced with my sister, both of them carrying shopping bags for the house. "We are updating the living room," my mother announced. "It needs a more modern feel now that your sister is taking a bigger role." They moved furniture while I stood there holding Mateo's backpack from school, feeling like a guest in my own home. My husband watched from the doorway and said nothing. Later that night, he told me quietly that maybe it was time I found my own place, that the stress was not good for the family. My mother had planted that seed and he had watered it. My neighbor had been there through it all, bringing casseroles and listening while I cried about the distance growing between me and my husband. But every detail I shared somehow reached my mother within hours. When I mentioned to my neighbor that I was considering a small apartment near my old tech office, my mother showed up the next day with a realtor friend, casually mentioning how that neighborhood was overpriced for someone with my limited skills. The pieces fit together too neatly. Back in the conference room, my mother pushed the papers closer. "I am done waiting. Sign, or we will make this far more unpleasant for you and Mateo." My father stood up suddenly, his quiet anger finally breaking through. "Enough. This is going too far, even for you." He walked to the window, staring out his back to us, but he did not leave the room. It was the most he had ever shown in front of her, and it gave me a flicker of hope I knew I could not afford. My lawyer cleared her throat. "The documents are ready as discussed. Harper has reviewed them." I lowered the pen to the page, heart pounding. This was it. She would sign for the assets and inherit the debt avalanche she had created. But as the tip touched the paper, my mother's phone buzzed again. She picked it up, read the message, and this time her smile turned triumphant. "Well, Harper, it looks like your uncle has had a change of heart. He just sent me copies of those so-called secret documents you thought were hidden. Interesting how the trust for Mateo is not as untouchable as you believed." The room went still. My stomach dropped. My uncle had been my only real ally in this, the one person who knew every detail. If she had those copies now, the trap I had set for her might be the one closing around me instead. My mother leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with victory. "You really thought you could play this game better than me. Sign the papers, or I will make sure Mateo hears exactly who has been lying to him all these years." My hand froze over the signature line. Everything I had planned for 4 years was unraveling in real time, and the worst part was the look on my son's face when he would eventually learn the truth, whatever version my mother fed him. I had one chance left to salvage something, but the cost was already climbing higher than I had ever imagined. My mother's hand closed around my phone like she owned the conversation itself. She held it closer to her mouth, her voice sweet for Mateo's ears but laced with that same cutting sarcasm she reserved for me. "Mateo, sweetheart, your mother is signing the papers right now because she knows this is what is best for the family. The house and the business are going to stay with people who actually know how to run them. You will not have to worry about moving schools or any of those problems she caused. Your grandmother will make sure everything is taken care of." Mateo's voice came back small and confused through the speaker. "But Mom always said the house was ours." My mother did not let me answer. She simply ended the call with a tap, then slid the phone back across the table toward me with a satisfied smile. "There. Now he knows the truth from someone who actually cares about his future. You see, Harper, that is what protecting the family looks like. You have spent 4 years pretending you were the one holding everything together when you were the one dragging us under." My father stepped forward, then his usual forced laugh nowhere in sight. This time his reaction was different, a quiet, protective anger that made him place a steady hand on my shoulder for the briefest second while he spoke directly to my mother. "Stop using the boy as a weapon. He is 13. Let Harper finish this conversation with him later in private. We do not need to turn this into a public spectacle in front of the lawyer and everyone else." My mother waved his hand away, like it was nothing, her eyes never leaving mine. "Sit down. You have never understood what it takes to keep this family strong. Harper has always been the weak link, and today we are finally cutting it loose. Sign the papers, Harper. Or the next call I make will be to Mateo's school principal, explaining exactly why his mother is the reason the family finances are in chaos." My sister leaned in, her voice eager to echo my mother. "My mother is right. You never had what it takes. Just sign so we can all move on." My husband had slipped back into the room during the call, but he stayed near the door, arms crossed, saying nothing. His silence spoke louder than any words. My neighbor sat frozen, her eyes fixed on the table, no longer pretending to be on my side. The pen felt heavy in my hand. I thought of the trust I had built for Mateo with my uncle, the $460,000 I had protected for his college and his future. I thought of the addendum buried in the stack, the one that was supposed to make my mother inherit every single debt if she took the assets. $900,000 in mortgages on the house alone. $200,000 in maxed lines of credit. $300,000 in back taxes and vendor bills. The entire empire underwater by $300,000. She was about to claim it all, and the liability was supposed to crush her. But my uncle's betrayal changed everything. Those copies he sent her this morning meant she knew exactly what was coming. She had already prepared her own counters. The trap I had spent 4 years building had been dismantled before I even walked into this room. I signed the first page, then the next. Each stroke of the pen felt like giving away pieces of myself I would never get back. My mother watched every signature with growing satisfaction, her sarcasm turning triumphant. There we go! Finally acting like the daughter I raised instead of the burden I tolerated. My father tried one last quiet intervention as I reached the final page. He leaned down beside me, voice low enough that only I could hear. "You do not have to do this. We can pause and talk to your uncle ourselves. This is not fair to you or the boy." My mother overheard anyway, and cut in immediately, her voice sharp and final. "Fair Harper has never understood fair. She has taken from this family for 12 years and given nothing back but excuses. Sign the last page, Harper." "The $35,000 is already more than generous." I signed. The room stayed silent for a long moment after the last page. My lawyer looked at the stack with a tight expression, then spoke carefully. "The transfer is complete as agreed, but the addendum on liabilities is still attached." My mother laughed again, that short, sharp sound. "Oh, that your uncle took care of that little detail when he sent me the full files this morning. He confirmed the trust for Mateo has some technical issues with the way it was funded. We will be reviewing it with our own attorney next week. The assets transfer clean, Harper. The debts stay with the company structure I control. You walked away with almost nothing, just like you deserved." The words landed like the final blow. My plan had not just failed, it had been turned against me. The trust Mateo was supposed to rely on could now be challenged. The debts I had counted on crushing her would somehow be shifted or hidden again, because my uncle had folded under whatever pressure or promise she made him. My father stood there, his shoulders slumped in a new kind of quiet defeat, the protective anger from earlier fading into helpless resignation, as he realized he could not fix this. He muttered something about calling my uncle later, but we all knew it would change nothing. My husband finally spoke, his voice flat. "I will pick up Mateo from school today. You can come get your things from the house tomorrow." My sister was already texting someone, probably celebrating the win. My neighbor slipped out of the room without a word. I stood up, slowly smoothing my dress, the $35,000 settlement, suddenly feeling like the smallest consolation prize in history. I had protected Mateo from hearing the worst version of the story today, but at the cost of almost everything else. The house we had built together, the business I had kept alive for 12 years, the financial safety net I thought I had secured, all of it gone, because my mother had outmaneuvered me at the last second. The walk out of that conference room felt longer than any I had ever taken. My mother stayed behind with the lawyer, already discussing the next steps for the company, as if I had never existed. My father followed me into the hallway, his voice soft for the first time in years. "I am sorry. I should have spoken up sooner." "But you know how she is." I nodded, but the words did not comfort me. I had chosen to sign to shield my son from her poison in that moment, and now I was the one left carrying the weight of the loss. No dramatic courtroom reversal, no satisfying collapse of her empire, just the quiet, heavy reality that she had won, and I had sacrificed the future I had planned for both of us to keep one small piece of his innocence intact today. Weeks later, the reality settled in even harder. I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment near my old tech office with the $35,000. Mateo split time between me and my husband, but the distance between us grew because my mother made sure he heard her version of events first. The trust faced immediate legal challenges. and while it was not completely lost, the legal fees ate into what was left. My uncle never answered my calls again. My mother and my sister kept the house and the business. They rebranded it, posted about the fresh start online, and never once looked back. My husband moved on quickly his new life, fitting neatly into the one my mother had shaped for him. I went back to my customer success job full-time, enrolled in a few evening classes to update my skills, and tried to build something smaller for myself and Mateo. But every time I looked at my son, I saw the shadow of what I had given up to protect him. The lesson was a painful one. Sometimes choosing yourself means accepting that the people who were supposed to love you will always choose power instead. Sometimes the only victory is surviving the defeat with your dignity and your child still speaking to you. I sat in my small apartment one evening, the sage green walls I had painted myself the only reminder of the choices I used to make, and I realized the freedom I thought I would feel never quite arrived. It was replaced by a quiet heaviness that I carry every day. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to make a painful choice to protect your child, even when it cost you everything, tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and knowing I am not alone makes this weight a little easier to carry.